always great to lead with a cute kid, right? You're already laughing, you're clapping, you're excited. Yeah! Right? So today, well, hi. It's a joy to be here with you for the first time, and I was so surprised to have Green Spirit Band. We have played together at Unity Village Chapel, and so I've got my friends with me. It just feels great, so good. I'm also a Lawrence girl. I'm a Jayhawk. I went to KU from 92 to 97 and lived in Lawrence until 2006, so I feel very comfortable here and at home, and that was before my Unity days, so it's like kind of full circle for me. So thank you so much for having me here. Today we're going to talk about Passion Sunday, which, if you have been part of the liturgical calendar before 1970, and I think some of you maybe. Of course, if you were living the 60s, you might not remember, but before 1970, Passion Sunday was before Palm Sunday and then Easter. But after 1970 and beginning that year, Passion Sunday and Palm Sunday were combined. Okay, so I brought some books with me, and the reason I'm pulling it back out is not just because in Keep a True Lent, Charles Fillmore, before 1970, had it in his flow of the Lent season, but because I think we have come to this habit, if you will, maybe even a preference, of sort of squishing the process of passion and triumph, passion being pain and suffering, the passion story of Christ, pain and suffering. So the process of experiencing pain and suffering to the point we experience triumph and victory. We squish that together because we don't want to sit in the pain part of it, right? We just want to get to the promised land. We just want to get to that deliverance experience, the resurrection experience, the victory over death, pain, and suffering, right? So I think it's an opportunity for us to just slow it down, because it gives us the opportunity to apply spiritual discipline. So we just saw this video of this little boy. It's a little boy, he has a ponytail, jumping and falling and jumping and falling. And some of those look like they might have hurt. And you could hear him sometimes, you know. But there's also sort of that pain of failure. So it's not just the physical pain of falling, but I didn't achieve my goal. I didn't reach the victory of my challenge. Yet he stayed with it. And it was interesting to me because I assumed it was a girl too the first time, which, then has an extra special sweetness to it. But as I read through the comments, I realized it's a boy. But I realized that part of the reason I think that I thought it was a girl wasn't just the ponytail, because he did have on blue pull-ups, right? I don't know if you noticed that. But it was because of the kisses that his father gave him at the end, right? The holding and just sort of that tenderness that he engaged with him, even the slap on the butt, and that, we're going to do this. So that was his son. And we see that tenderness also reflected in the Bible story of Jesus and his relationship with God, the Father. We see that tenderness. This is my son with whom I am well pleased. And so we are at a day and age where we don't have to, even Fillmore at this time is using sonship, S-O-N, sonship, that kind of terminology, but we don't have to do that anymore. We can let go of that. And so that it isn't that we are entering and learning and claiming a sonship for ourselves, but a Christ consciousness that is available to each of us, regardless of where we live on the gender spectrum. Passion. The theme for today, for Passion Sunday, is overcoming. And I added grace and power to that, because I think it is through grace and power that we can truly move through the pain, through the challenges, through the grit of life into our victory experience. how do we get to the place of allowing grace and power to be our guiding light, to be our path in and with our pain? So in and past our pain, we want to get to that part, but in and with our pain. Those failures don't stay behind us, right? We carry them with us. Every time we stand ready to jump, we remember the time we failed, don't we? Our brains are designed to carry patterns, to identify patterns, to help us survive, right? It's a very primitive aspect of our brain. So when we stand before our great mountain, whatever it is, we carry with us all of our history, and not just our own personal history, but the history of our parents and our grandparents and our society. You know, we're seeing a lot of uprisal today. There's a march next week, March for Our Lives. Our youth are rising up. And just Google Rise Up lyrics. There have been song after song after song carrying the message in pop culture, rise up. So our youth have heard it. They've heard the message, and they are rising up. Back to the 60s. There was a lot of rising up. The music you chose today was so perfect, as it would happen by divine appointment, yes? And yet we find ourselves personally and collectively in this experience of needing to overcome the choices we've made, the limiting thoughts that we hold, the choices our parents made, the choices our ancestors made, the choices our founding fathers made. We carry all of that with us every time we approach our own personal mountain. And then we do this thing where we sort of justify the limiting thoughts. We justify the pain. We actually apply brute force, right, to the process of accomplishment, of achievement. And not so much even in terms of like fighting, but sometimes it's psychological brute force. Just think about your relationships. Well, I'm not going to say a word, and we'll just see how long it takes her to notice. Well, I'm not going to go this time. If it's going to be like that every time we go, I'm not going to go. And we'll just see. And we're really good at passive aggressiveness, right? That's brute force to achieve a goal. And it's born in our pain. So we need to sit with that pain. We just need to sit with it and be honest with it and with self, so that we can stand before the mountain, releasing our limiting thoughts, allowing grace, allowing personal power, which is not an expression through brute force, but personal power, personal truth to guide us to that leap. Yeah. Then it's a celebration. We haven't won by force. We haven't broken any spiritual laws or principles. We have stood in integrity. So we're going to step back a little bit. Before we get to the grace and the power, there are some things that we need to say, to know, to take in to our being. Charles Fillmore would call that faith. So he wrote in Keep a True Lent that overcoming can only happen if we claim our true power, if we embody that true power. So he says step one is to claim our sonship. So let's hear that as claiming our Christ consciousness inherent in each of us, step one. And that we do that through faith, because we can't prove it. We can't see it. I can't show you my certification, right? So we have to, through faith, claim that essence for us. Step two, we need to act, demonstrate, think that essence. So we demonstrate the truth of our being, Christ consciousness, through every thought and action that we take. Faithfully, faith-filled. First, through faith we claim it. Second, as we are filled with that faith, we demonstrate it. So faith then lays the path for us to move in grace and power, because if we claim that and know that for ourselves, then we can only at the same time have an experience of grace. Because our thoughts would have all the proof in the world of why this isn't true for us. Or perhaps why it's not true about somebody else. And if it's not true about somebody else, it might not be true about me, right? So grace is absolutely attached to faith. If we have that true experience of it, if we have that true knowing, which can only happen through faith, then grace comes along for the ride. And inherent in our Christ consciousness is power, right? That is the holy power in the universe. It's not God, Jesus. Christ consciousness was before Jesus. And it's even written in the scriptures that way. It was before Jesus. Jesus is our master teacher. Jesus embodied the Christ consciousness to a full potential. So we can learn from that. We can use that as an idea. And we can know that most of the stories about Jesus are only partially told. Some might be kind of skewed or added to or made up after the fact. And it doesn't matter, because the message contains truth for us, if we allow it. So it becomes our gift and our experience to have this demonstration, that we can also reach for the stars, if you will, in our own lives and in our own ways. That we can push ourselves out of our self-imposed limits, that we may overcome. Martin Luther King said, overcomer, yes. Martin Luther King said that faith is taking the first step, even without seeing the whole staircase. Faith is the path. And the assumption is that if you are to take the first step, you have already deemed yourself worthy of the journey. And our worthiness comes from our Christ presence, our Christ consciousness. We are already worthy to walk the path that is set before us. Nelson Mandela. I bring my phone up with me because it has the Bible and Google. What else do you need in life, right? Just call me Rev. Nelson Mandela. I am fundamentally an optimist. This is the man imprisoned for 20 years for having done no wrong. I am fundamentally an optimist. Whether that comes from nature or nurture, I cannot say. Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed toward the sun, one's feet moving forward. There were many dark moments when my faith in humanity was sorely tested, but I would not and could not give myself up to despair. That way lays defeat and death. Now that's a testimony, right? That is a testimony. That way leads defeat and death. So if we are to take the way that leads to life, to victory, we must do so with faith and allow grace and power to be that which propels us forward, knowing that the fact we have even taken the first step means that we have embodied the worthiness to do so, to be the journeyman or journeywoman, to be the one on the path. And we forget that. We allow insecurities to come in. We allow history to show up. I fell the last 37 times I tried this. I failed. I did not achieve. It hurt. It hurt me to the core. Yet we rise up and do that which is ours to do because we are faith-filled, because we are in the Christ consciousness, and because we have no choice at that point but to live the light that we have been called to live and to trust through faith. That grace will release us from the past, and in some cases, release others from the past. And power, true power, will carry us forward. So this is today's Keeping a True Lent, if you will, published by Daily Word. For Overcoming Sunday, the affirmation is, I claim my dominion as the Christ, the divine energy that indwells every human being. I express my innate perfection. Ooh, how does that feel? My innate perfection. It's really easy to be like, of course. We're here together on Sunday morning. Yeah, it feels good. We're all the Christ. We're all present, and it's for us, and it's for everybody. Ah! And we get back in the car. We look over at the person in the car with us. You might work on that a little bit. You might work on your Christ self, right? Or maybe, we're reminded of somebody here in the room. Well, next week, maybe. She won't be there, so it'll be better. Right? We do these things. We notice our shortcomings in self and in others. Carl Jung would say it's a projection, so whatever you see as a shortcoming in someone else is really that which you see in yourself. Let me read it again. I claim my dominion as the Christ, the divine energy that indwells every human being. I express my innate perfection. So at the core is where we tend to see our brokenness, isn't it? And then we maybe put a wall of perfection around it that we want everyone else to see. And then we live outwardly in some mix in between, because that which we hold at the core will seep out. But the opposite is true. Our perfection is at the core. Our divine nature is innate and at the core of each of us. And then we build around that a wall of insecurity, of brokenness, ideas that have been given to us or that we've picked up along the way that would negate the truth of that core. That is our true overcoming. If we can overcome that experience in each of us, then we do it collectively, and that, my friends, is how we change the world. Thank you. Yeah, and now is the time, and we are the ones. So we stand boldly with faith. We claim our true perfection, our innate Christ consciousness, our divine inheritance. And we wait. And we jump to victory. Yeah. Right, so let's that be our affirmation all together. Yeah! And feel that release, right? It's the release of all that we have overcome, the release of the limiting thoughts that we were holding. When we do it and we kind of surprise ourselves, we make the accomplishment, we achieve the goal, and it's like, oh, I actually did it, right? And that just shows us the limiting thoughts that we carried with us. And it's okay. Grace, grace, grace. So let's all stand up if you are able and willing. No, I wore heels, so if I'm not going to do it, you don't have to do it. I do want you to stand feet shoulder width apart, if that feels comfortable. And just your hands. And like Nelson Mandela, looking up to the sun. You can close your eyes if that feels good. You can keep them open. Truth, power, grace, overcoming. And this is not to negate any painful experience that you've had. It's not to erase the past. It's not to deny history. But it's to stand in truth anyway. To claim Christ consciousness anyway. This is the abiding truth. This is the abiding power that takes us forward on the path laid before us through faith. Grace and power carrying us and lifting us to victory. And all together our affirmation. Yeah! Blessings to you.